بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today, inshallah, we're going to look at Kitab al-Janaiz after we've concluded with Kitab al-Salah. This is the chapter on funeral rites and rituals. Imam al-Ba'li rahimahullah ta'ala begins with this chapter. He says, يُسَنُّ الْإِسْتِعْدَادُ لِلْمَوْتِ وَالْإِكْثَارُ مِنْ ذِكْرِهِ وَتُسَنُّ عِيَادَةُ مَرِيضٍ مُسْلِمٍ غِبًّا مِنْ أَوَّلِ الْمَرَضِ بُكْرَةً وَعَشِيَّةً وفي رمضان ليلا وتذكيره التوبة والوصية ويدعو له أعد بالعافية والصلاح ولا يطيل الجلوس عنده وينبغي أن يحسن ظنه بالله. Okay, so jumping right into this, rites and rituals of the funeral. Prior to the funeral, of course, there's a couple of things that should be noted. He begins by saying it is recommended to prepare for death and to remember it frequently. This is a recommendation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, healthy or otherwise. Preparation for death is best done through repentance and leaving off sin and transgression. And the more frequent you do that, the more prepared you will be for the moment, which none of us know when that will be. After that, he says it's also recommended to visit a sick Muslim. And this is from the rights of your Muslim brother upon you, is that when they fall ill, you visit them, so long as they are not boycott worthy. Meaning a person you might boycott, like an innovator. Imam al-Ba'li points out like a Rafidi. It's like one of the Rafidi Shia, who you wouldn't pay such a visit to, because of the innovation that they've involved themselves in their belief. In this case, they're worthy of being boycotted or shunned or avoided, and so you wouldn't fulfill these types of rites. And the visitation for the Muslim that you're going to visit due to them being sick is every other day. Notice here he says, عِبَادَةُ مَرِيدٍ مُسْلِمٍ غِبًّا. Every other day. Basically, you don't want to overwhelm the ill with constant visitation, and at the same time you don't want to abandon them either. You have to be balanced here. You give them some time to rest, go through whatever treatments they're facing, etc. So you'll visit them every other day. This can be done in both the morning and the evening. While during Ramadan the nights are preferred, visiting in Ramadan at night is easier for the one who's fasting. Ill person is not likely to be fasting. And we're considering both parties here. One should remind them, he says here, one should remind them, meaning remind the ill to repent and to draft a will, just to be prepared. The will here is not inclusive of all inheritance. The inheritance laws in Islam are already set. There's a system in place for that, but the wasiyah is like you're going to bequeath some portion of your wealth up to a third, and a third is considered a lot in this regard, where you would assign something of your estate that you may want to give away or direct outside of the typical inheritance structure. So this would be something you would encourage the ill to make sure they've completed. The visitor should pray for the person's recovery and righteousness, or their health, if you will. Avoid prolonging the visit. Prolonging the visit, you're sitting there for quite some time. It can become an annoyance to the sick person. It could interrupt procedures that may need to be done, or other various activities. It could put them in an embarrassing situation. As you know, sometimes when you're ill, you're unable to present yourself in the best manner possible. You may be bedridden, maybe certain things that you don't want other people to witness. And so a visitor should keep the visit light, positive, filled with prayers, reminders, and remembrance. And then they keep it moving. And they, the ill, should maintain a good opinion of Allah. This is very important when going through hardships such as illness, sickness, injury, etc., is that you maintain husnul dhan billah. You don't get overwhelmed and burdened with worries and fears, or become angry or upset with Allah's decree while you're going through such trials and tribulations, but you always maintain a good opinion. قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ, as Allah wills, will be, as He has decreed, will occur, and you're always hopeful in Allah's mercy and cure. He goes on to the next section, وَلَا يَجِبُ التَّدَاوِي وَلَوْ ظَنَّ نَفْعَهُ وَتَرْكُهُ أَفْضَلُ وَيَحْرُمُ بِمُحَرَّمٍ وَيُبَاحُ كتب قرآن وذكر بإناء لحامل لعسر الولادة ومريض ويسقيانه وإذا نزل به سنة لأرفق أهله به تعاهدوا بل لحلقه بماء أو شراب وتندية شفتيه بقطنة وتلقينه لا إله إلا الله مرة ولم يزد على 3 إلا أن يتكلم فيعيده برفق وقراءة الفاتحة وياسين عنده وتوجيهه إلى القبلة على جنبه الأيمن مع سعة المكان وإلا فعلى ظهره وأخمصاه إلى القبلة. All right, so right away he says seeking treatment is not obligatory. We're talking about medical treatment. Medicine, going to the doctor, etc., while you're ill or facing, even if it's a terrible sickness or terminal, you're not obliged to seek treatment, even if benefit is expected from that treatment. They say, hey, listen, the doctor says, listen, there's a cure, this is typically cures people, it does very well, people that take this medicine or this treatment, they typically do very well, etc. It still does not oblige you to do it. And abandoning it is preferable. Meaning abandoning treatment is preferable if it's done as a means of reliance upon Allah. A person of strong faith may say, I recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that grants shifa, and I'm not interested in taking these means, these worldly things. I'm not reliant upon them, and so I'm going to forego them in reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This one always gets a little bit of pushback from people because we live in a world where death is one of the most feared things, and sickness is also often the precursor to death, and so we are willing to spend on that in astronomical amounts. That's why the medical industry is able to charge such high prices. It's because we don't want to die. And we're afraid of what's after death. And so we'll agree to pay an arm and a leg and have to take out insurance policies so that we can be treated. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take medicine. The Prophet ﷺ indicated that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a cure for every disease. And there is prophetic medicine. So there are various different views on the role of medicine and medical treatment in the life of the ill. But again, here the madhab is that it's preferred, or I should say it's afdal, more rewarding, we could say, if you do not seek treatment as a form of reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's prohibited to seek treatment with unlawful means, meaning you cannot take medicine that is made up of impermissible ingredients, like intoxicants. If there's some form of intoxicant or some form of najasa in there, so if there's an animal byproduct from an animal that wasn't properly slaughtered, then this is najasa, and it's impermissible to consume najasat besides the intoxicants. Or things like singing or music, if they're prescribed as medicinal treatment for various different temperaments or, states a person might be in. then this is something we've been discussing previously, the impermissible nature of that. And the scholars in this madhab, they mention that here in the larger works, such as singing and music, etc. It's permitted to write Quranic verses and invocations, ad'iyah, in a vessel for a woman experiencing difficulty in labor or for someone ill, and then have them drink from it. So basically what that means is you would write verses from the Quran. You would use normally like an edible type of ink. It might be like saffron or something of that nature on a paper. You would write out the verses or write some type of supplications, and then you would put it in water such that it dissolved into the water, and then they would drink that. This has been reported from the Prophet ﷺ. So this is a prophetic, another form of prophetic guidance, and this is seeking shifa from these supplications and these verses from the Quran. If death is imminent, here, and this is when he says, وَإِذَا نُزِلَ بِهِ سُنَّ لِأَرْفَقِ أَهْلِهِ بِهِ. وَإِذَا نُزِلَ here means when death descends. And we're specifically talking about the angel that is assigned to remove the soul. If they have descended, it is recommended for the gentlest among the family to moisten the throat, their throat, meaning the one that's passing away or about to pass away, with water or a drink, and to dampen their lips with cotton, like moist cotton, or something moist, a moist cloth. This is done to lighten the burden of their passing. And this was something noted at the Prophet ﷺ during his passing that his wife did for him. And he talked about the severity of death and the nature of its burden. And they should gently prompt the one dying to say, La ilaha illallah. This is called talqeen. This is when you prompt the one who's getting ready to pass to say, La ilaha illallah, such that the last words that they utter before they pass is the shahada. And this should be done gently once and no more than 3 times, so that they don't end up refusing to say it. Like a stubborn or an adamant refusal to say La ilaha illallah. It might be a person's in such a state that they are not cognizant or are unable, or something is holding them from that. But you do want to gently prompt them to do that. 1 to no more than 3 times, unless the person speaks other words after that, in which case it may be repeated gently again. Like if they start to say something else after they said the shahada, and you realize this is their final moments, then you can usher them or prompt them again with the talqeen, to say La ilaha illallah, such that the last thing that they say is this shahada. It's recommended to recite Al-Fatiha and Surah Yasin near them. This has been reported to facilitate the soul's exit with ease from the body. It's also been reported that you should read Tabarak, Surah Al-Mulk. It's also recommended to turn them toward the Qibla on their right side if space allows, otherwise on their back with their soles of their feet facing the Qibla. Okay, so these are some of the recommendations leading up to a person's passing. He says, وَيَعْتَمِدُ عَلَى اللَّهِ فِي مَنْ يُحِبُّ وَيُوصِي لِلْأَرْجَحِ فِي نَظَرِهِ فإذا مات سن تغميض عينيه ويباح من محرم ذكر أو أنثى ويكره من حائض وجنب أن يتقرباه وقول بسم الله وعلى وفاة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وشد لحييه بإصابة وتليين مفاصله وخلء ثيابه وستره بثوب وإسراء تجهيزه إن مات غير فجأة وتفرقة وصيته ويجب في قضاء دينه. All right, he entrusts to Allah those whom he loves and bequeaths to whomever he deems most deserving. This is the one that's passing. That's one of the worries of a person's passing away, is the family members they're going to leave behind. They become very worried about their well-being, especially if they were a provider or a caretaker. They might be thinking, oh, how are my loved ones going to survive without me? And so what they should be doing is putting their trust in Allah in regards to those loved ones. Allah's going to take care of it. You're now going to meet your Maker. It's not, now this is over. And then, of course, the wasiyah comes back here. They will bequeath to whomever they deem most deserving, be they a relative or otherwise. You can, as I said, assign a portion of your wealth to be distributed as you wish to other organizations or family members or friends or something of that nature. You get an allotted amount, which you can do. And then the rest of your wealth or your estate will be inherited according to the laws of Islam. When the person dies, it is recommended to close their eyes. This closing of the eyes is permitted for a mahram, male or female, meaning the opposite gender. So like a son could close the eyes of his mother or his sister. Or, the mother could close the eyes of a son or her brother or something of that nature. It's permitted here with this scenario. But we're basically ruling out non-mahram of the opposite gender, of course, would not be touching the body. They're going to treat the body like they would as if they were still alive. So a non-mahram, we have to consider those issues as well, even if the body's passed away. It's disliked for a menstruating woman or someone in a state of major ritual impurity to do so or to approach the deceased. This has been directly mentioned from Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala. One should, as per recommendation, say, in the name of Allah and upon the way of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's Bismillahi wa ala wafati Rasulillah, upon the passing of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's also recommended to bind their jaw with a cloth, meaning so that their mouth stays closed. That way when they pass away, their mouth doesn't droop open. And something could fly in there, or it's just a bad look. All right? So they would wrap something under the chin and then tie it above the head. Right? So they would tie basically the jaw shut. Soften their joints is recommended. This is done by opening and closing the limbs, opening the fingers and hands, folding the arms back and forth. The same thing with the legs, pulling the legs up to the stomach perhaps, or moving the joints back and forth so that the body remains kind of loose. And this will help in the washing process. Once the body has gone cold and stiff, then it's no longer recommended to move the body like this. At some point, the body will begin to stiffen up. And at that point, you don't want to force the limbs to move around out of fear that you might actually harm the body. And the Prophet ﷺ indicated that the body will be impacted by such movements like it was in life. So like breaking a bone in death is like breaking it in life. Like, so if they were alive and you actually broke a finger, it'd be like you broke their finger while they were alive. Okay, and so the sanctity of the Muslim's body, even though they're passed away, and in our minds we're thinking, yeah, there's no problem. They're gone. There's no feeling. There's no nothing. There's nothing happening. We still have to treat the body in a manner we would when it was alive. So being gentle, being merciful, being kind, being respectful, honor and dignity, all of those things have to be afforded when you're handling the Muslim who has passed away. You remove their clothing. This will cool the body and delay decomposition. Cover them with a sheet in order to cover their aura and hasten the preparation if death was not sudden. Sudden death here would require you to delay a bit to establish certainty of death. Today it's a bit easier to establish that with certainty than it may have been in the past, where a person may have appeared to have passed away but was actually not dead, and they were unable to detect whether they had with certainty passed away or not. And this is so that you don't actually accidentally bury somebody. They could be in a state of coma or something. The vitals are so low they're undetected by the average person. They might not even know what to look for or listen for. So you want to establish their death with certainty. It's recommended for their will to be distributed, and their debts are required to be paid. وَيَجِبُ فِي قَضَاءِ دَيْنِهِ. And this should happen quickly. We don't want our deceased carrying their debts into the next life. The debt is a terrible thing to carry with you after, a terrible burden. The next chapter is about the washing of the deceased. The Imam, he says, وَغَسْلُهُ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ سِوَى شَهِيدِ مَعْرَكَةٍ وَمَقْتُولٍ ظُلْمًا وَلَوْ كَانَ أُنْثَيَيْنِ أَوْ غَيْرَ مُكَلَّفَيْنِ وشرط في ماء طهورية وإباحة وفي غاسل إسلام وعقل وتمييز والأفضل ثقة عارف بأحكام الغسل أو الغسل وإذا أخذ في غسله ستر أورته وجوبا والسنة تجريده وستره في العيون تحت ستر وكره حضور غير معين في غسله. So they're washing. Here we're talking about the deceased being washed is a communal obligation. We've talked about what that means. Somebody in the community has to do this job. Except for one who was martyred in battle or killed unjustly, they are not to be washed. They're left as they are and preyed upon as they are. And without washing them, even if they're bloodied and wounded, etc., you leave them as they are. Even if either is a female or not legally accountable. The water must be tahur. We talked about the waters being tahur, tahir, and najis. We're going to use tahur water like we would to purify our bodies while alive. It has to be ritually pure and purifying, and it also has to be permissible. These are the conditions of the water that's used. It can't be stolen water or misappropriated water. It has to be permissible water to use. The washer must be Muslim, sane, meaning of sound mind, and of discerning age. Tamyiz. So we understand tamyiz to begin at the age of 7. 7 to 15, at least until puberty sets in. So a younger child could potentially wash an older person that's passed away. It's preferable that the person be trustworthy and knowledgeable of the rulings of washing. You want someone trustworthy for obvious reasons. Okay? They're going to be there. They're not supposed to look at your aura. And so they're entrusted that they'll manage that situation appropriately. And if they do see something unintentionally, they're not going to go talking about it either. Or if they see something that's not pleasing, that may lead others to believe he passed away with su'u khatima. It's like he had a bad end. Like maybe his face was disfigured or something about his body that may lead someone to think that, well, this isn't a good sign for this person. They would not go publicizing that information, not even like to their closest wife or whatever, or husband. You know, sometimes we divulge these secrets we shouldn't, even with those members of our family, because we believe it endears us to them, or it means that we have a closer bond or relationship. It's not permissible to do that kind of behavior. Yeah, some things are secret and they're meant to be kept. It doesn't matter the relation that you have with another person. It just, it goes with you to the grave. You die with certain things. And I have to take this moment to note that that significant other shouldn't be trying to extract this type of information at the same time. Come on, I'm your sweetheart. I'm your so-and-so. You should tell me. If you loved me, you would. Well, you don't trust me? It's not an issue of trust between me and you. It's an issue of trust between me and this other person or this other thing that's happened. It has nothing to do with you. وَمِنْ حُسْنِ الْإِسْلَامِ الْمَرْءِ تَرْكُهُ مَا لَا يَعْنِي. Right? The beauty of one's Islam is that they're not bothered with things that they have nothing to do with. It doesn't matter the relationship with the other person. So that's why you want somebody trustworthy there, and obviously someone that knows the rulings of the washing so that they can perform it in its best possible fashion. Once they begin washing them, they're obliged to cover their aura, meaning the aura of the deceased, of course. The person washing should also be covered. It is recommended to strip the body and shield it from onlookers under a screen. And that might be done in a room, like with a roof, so that people couldn't see in it. Right? They're already going to have something over the body. But now, so that the aura is covered. But now we don't want onlookers just watching the process, even if the aura is covered. Again, there might be things that could happen. There could be accidents, unintentional exposure, or something from the deceased. All right, all of that should be concealed. It's not a spectator activity. So we're going to have this washing occur in a private setting. And therefore, the presence of anyone besides those assisting with the wash is disliked. So, typically there's like somebody, typically this is done by more than one person because it requires a bit of maneuvering. And so, normally there's like one person that's doing the washing, and then there's another person that's managing the water and the soaps and stuff. So one person is making the washing and scrubbing and making wudu, etc., and the other person's pouring the water as is needed. Or moving the body. Right? So it might be that there's 2 people, there may be, if needed, 4 people or more people, but the limit is based on what's needed for that particular situation. And beyond that, you're just spectating. You're not supposed to be there. Okay? ثُمَّ نَوَى. Let's see, where are we at? Is that right? ثُمَّ نَوَى وَسَمَّى. So we ended here. غَيْرُ مُعِينٍ فِي غَسْلِهِ ثُمَّ نَوَى وَسَمَّى وُجُوبًا كَغَسْلِ الْحَيِّ or كغسل الحي والسنة أن يرفع رأس غير حامل إلى قرب جلوسه ويعصر بطنه برفق ويكون ثم بخور ويكثر صب الماء حينئذ ثم يلف على يده خرقة مبلولة فينجيه بها وحرم مس عورة من له 7 سنين ثم يدخل إبهامه وسبابته وعليهما خرقة مبلولة بماء بين شفتيه فيمسح أسنانه وفي منخريه فينظفهما ثم يوضئه استحبابا ولا يدخل ماء في فمه وأنفه ويغسل رأسه برغوة السدر وبدنه بثفله ويغسل شقه الأيمن ثم الأيسر ثم يفيض الماء على جميع بدنه. Okay, so this is talking about the means or the method of washing the deceased. So the washer must intend, make an intention here, a niyyah, and say the basmalah. So this is an act of devotion, essentially. We require an intention, and we're going to begin with the name of Allah. Both are obligatory, as is the washing of the living, the ghusl of the living. And we've talked about this in the chapter of wudu. Mentioning Allah's name is foregone in the event of forgetting it or being ignorant of its ruling. It's recommended to raise the head of one not pregnant to a near seated or sitting position and gently pressing on the abdomen, stomach area. All right, so while they're laying down, you want to raise their head up so that they're kind of seated, and then you press on their stomach. And the idea is that it will remove any impurities from within the body. Basically, you're going to be expressing whatever is ready to come out. He notes, incense, bukhur should be burned now. Right? There might be some excrement or something that's going to come out. Generous water poured to clean the deceased. So as you're doing that, this is where you would have a mu'in, an assistant. While you're doing this, and there might be expressing something out of the body, there's obviously some perfumes going, some incense or bukhur burning, lots of water is being used to flush away that impurity. Typically you have like a sheet or something laid over the outer part, and the person is holding it. You're holding the sheet up here. You're pouring water like this. The other person's pressing, and then you're pouring like that. Yeah. And today, more than likely, there's like a sprayer. Yeah. Generous water is poured at that point. Then the washer The washer then wrap a damp cloth around their hand and use it to clean them. So here, because you're not allowed to touch the aura of a deceased person, so now you're going to wrap something around your hand. And the more you can wrap such that when you make contact, you're not feeling like direct, like if you put on a plastic glove, like you can tell what you're touching. But you want something bulky enough so that when you come in contact, it's just a surface. There's no description of the body being felt. Okay, so you're going to wrap something around your hand, and this is what you would use to wash away as necessary whatever excrement or filth that's come out of the body in this case. He says it's forbidden to touch the aura of anyone 7 years of age. So 7 years and older, you can't touch the aura. A younger than 7, so 6 and under, you can touch. There's no aura to lahu. First of all, they don't have an aura yet, so you know them being unclothed is not of any consequence. You touching the body anywhere is of no consequence in this case. But once they reach that 7 years and older, then we're going to respect the aura regardless of their age. The washer then inserts their thumb and index finger, which is wrapped in a cloth moistened with water, between the lips to wipe the teeth and into the nostrils to clean them. Performing wudu for them is recommended. So this is where you would just wipe the body part of wudu without inserting water into the mouth or nose. The head is washed using the foam of sidr. Sidr is the lote leaves. And the body, it's a mixture where you take the lote leaves and then you mix it into the water. And typically that makes when you stir it up enough, it makes a foam on top, and you take that foam, and that's what you would wash their head with. And then the body is washed with the residue of that, basically the water and the remnants of what's in there. The right side is washed first, so this is where the bucket would come in handy. You'd pour that on there. Okay. The right side is washed first, and the left, afterward, water is poured over the entire body. وَكُرِهَ اقْتِصَارٌ عَلَى غَسْلِهِ مَرَّةً إِن لَمْ يَخْرُجْ شَيْءٌ فَإِنْ خَرَجَ وَجَبَ إِعَادَتُهُ إِلَى 7 فَإِنْ خَرَجَ بَعْدَهَا حُشِيَ بِقُطْنٍ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَمْسِكْ فَبِطِينٍ حُرٍّ ثُمَّ يَغْسِلُ الْمَحَلَّ وَيُوَضَّأُ وُجُوبًا وَسَقْطٌ لِأَرْبَعَةِ أَشْهُرٍ كَمَوْلُودٍ حَيًّا. It's disliked to limit the washing to one time if nothing exits the body. It's disliked to limit to one washing. If something does exit the body, washing becomes obligatory again up to 7 times. If something exits afterward, meaning exits out of the body, the orifice is packed with cotton. If that does not hold, then then with pure clay. The area is then washed, and wudu is again obligatory in this case. A fetus miscarried at 4 months or more. 4 months is 120 days, approximately. 4 months of the lunar calendar. That's approximately 120 days. So if there is a miscarriage at 120 days or more, 4 months or more, whatever is miscarried is treated like a live-born child, and so they're washed and prayed upon. All right, the next section is about the shrouding. We're moving in a sequential order, as you can tell. We're going to wash, then we're going to shroud. He says, تَكْفِينُهُ وَتَكْفِينُهُ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ وَيَجِبُ لِحَقِّ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَلِحَقِّهِ ثَوْبٌ وَاحِدٌ لَا يَصِفُ الْبَشْرَةَ يَسْتُرُ جَمِيعَهُ وَسُنَّ تَكْفِينُ رَجُلٍ فِي 3 لفائف بيض من قطن وكره في أكثر تبسط بعضها على بعض بعد تبخيرها بنحو عود وتجعل الظاهرة أحسنها والحنوط فيما بينها ثم يوضع عليها مستلقيا ثم يرد طرف اللفافة العليا من الجانب الأيسر على شقه الأيمن ثم الأيمن على الأيسر ثم الثانية ثم الثالثة كذلك ويجعل أكثر الفاضل عند رأسه ثم يعقدها وتحل في القبر. وسن لامرأة وخنثى 5 أثواب وإزار وخمار وقميص ولفافتان، ولصغيرة قميص ولفافتان، ولصبي ثوب واحد، ويباح في 3 إن لم يرثه غير مكلف. All right, that's a lot. Shrouding. The shrouding of the deceased is a communal obligation, much like the washing of the deceased. Has to be done. 1 garment is obligatory as a right owed to Allah the Exalted and a right owed to the deceased, which means the deceased must be buried in at least 1 shroud, 1 garment to cover their entire body. It must not reveal the skin. Whether they're male or female, this is the minimum requirement. It is, however, recommended to shroud a man in 3 white cotton sheets. More than that, more than the 3 is disliked. It's considered israf. It's a waste. Yeah, that's right. These types of things are considered part of wealth. And someone that's passing away is going to be inheriting that wealth to others. And so wrapping them up in a bunch of their clothes and different things and purchasing all whatever it may be, you know, it's going to be a waste of that wealth. So it's disliked beyond the 3. The sheets are layered, one atop another, after being perfumed with something like oud. Okay? This is tabkhir. So this is where you've basically like smoked them. There's bukhur basically with oud, where they've gotten a nice fragrance to the shrouds. They're layered one on top of the other. The best of them is placed outermost. So the best of those shrouds is the one that's put down first, because that's the one that's going to be outside after it's folded and tied together. So the best one goes on the bottom, and then the next, and then the next after that. And between the layers, there's a mixture of perfume that's referred to as hanut. This is a mixture of perfume that's prepared specifically for the deceased. Then the deceased is laid upon those shrouds on their back. And then, in order to close them, the left edge of the innermost shroud or sheet is folded over the right side. This way. And then the right side is folded over the left. So if you need to remember that, how do you hold your hands in prayer? The left comes first, and then the right comes over. Maybe the next time you're standing in your prayer, you'll remember, this is how I'm going to be buried. One of my shroud's going to wrap like this around me. That might be a profound moment if you remembered that. Yeah. Left side goes over to the right, right side goes over to the left. And then the second and third sheets are wrapped likewise. One left over left and then right. The majority of the excess of cloth is gathered at the head. Then the shrouds are tied, and they'll be untied in the grave. They'll be loosened and let open. Not that you would open the whole thing. No, you would keep them closed because they need to be covered, but you would untie them. For a woman or an intersex person, 5 garments are recommended. The intersex person means naturally in that state. We've talked about that enough, but I feel like in today's day and age we have to mention that. It's a natural occurrence, not a surgery-induced one. 5 garments are recommended. An izar, that's the lower wrap. A khimar, that's the head covering. A qamis, that's the long gown or shirt. And 2 sheets or shrouds, that's for a woman. For a young girl, so basically the woman's almost clothed like she typically would be. Right? She has the izar, that's like a dress, like a skirt. She has the khimar, as we know, it's the top piece, and there's a long gown that goes over that as well. 2 shrouds. For a young girl until the age of puberty, a qamis, 1 long gown, and 2 sheets are recommended without a khimar, unneeded. For a boy, 1 sheet is recommended. Using 3 is permissible so long as the inheritors are not below the age of legal responsibility. If they're below the age of legal responsibility, they are not in a position to make that decision, meaning to utilize the wealth of that one that's passed away in order to say, yeah, let's Let's increase it from 1 to 3. If they're too young to make that decision, then you're going to be utilizing the wealth that they would inherit without them weighing in on the decision-making factor. So 1 would be sufficient. All right, so that wraps up the section on the kefan, which is the shroud. The next part is, what comes next, is prayer. This is the next section. وَالصَّلَاةُ عَلَيْهِ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ وتسقط بمكلف ولو أنثى ولو عبدا وتسن جماعة وشروطها 8 النية والتكليف واستقبال القبلة وستر العورة واجتناب النجاسة وحضور الميت إن كان بالبلد وإسلام المصلي والمصلى عليه وطهارتهما ولو بتراب. So here he says that praying over them, praying over the deceased that is a communal obligation fulfilled by the performance of any one legally responsible individual, even if they be a woman or a bond servant. Has to be mukallaf. Legal responsibility. We talked about that. Moral capacity, etc. They've reached the age of puberty, are in a sound mind. Performing the prayer in congregation is recommended. Its prerequisites are 8, meaning for the prayer: intention, legal responsibility, taklif, facing the qibla, covering the awrah, being free of ritual impurity, okay, means we have tahara, the presence of the deceased if within the same locality, the body is there, that both the one praying and the deceased are Muslim, meaning the Muslim's not going to pray over a non-Muslim. And a non-Muslim's not going to offer a janazah prayer over a Muslim. And that both the one praying and the one being prayed upon be in a state of purification. Ijtinabun najasa, obviously we talked about filth on the body, the clothing, that's a part of the normal prerequisites of prayer. And now the tahara issue of making wudu or ghusl as required, even if by use of earth, meaning if you made tayammum due to a legal excuse, this would suffice you for this portion of the prerequisites. He says, وَأَرْكَانُهَا سَبْعَةٌ الْقِيَامُ فِي فَرْضِهَا وَالتَّكْبِيرَاتُ الْأَرْبَعُ وَقِرَاءَةُ الْفَاتِحَةِ وَالصَّلَاةُ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَالدُّعَاءُ لِلْمَيِّتِ وَالسَّلَامُ وَالتَّرْتِيبُ وَالسُنَّ قِيَامُ إِمَامٍ وَمُنْفَرِدٍ عِنْدَ صَدْرِ رَجُلٍ وَوَسَطِ امْرَأَةٍ. Its pillars, the pillars of the prayer are 7. So we just did prerequisites or conditions. Now we're doing the pillars. Standing in the obligatory prayer. Standing in the obligatory prayer. The obligatory janazah is the one that's offered to fulfill the rites. There might be a second janazah prayed. Like if somebody missed, then they could offer the janazah even if it meant at the graveside. So that wouldn't be an obligation because that was already fulfilled. So, all right, this is like a voluntary janazah that's being prayed. That's why he makes the distinction here. Al-qiyamu fi fardiha. That standing in the obligatory janazah prayer. The 4 takbirs that are made during janazah prayer: recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, invoking blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ, supplication for the deceased, the salam, and performing them in sequence. So these things must be done in order, one after the other. The order is not arranged, and that's particular to when you read Al-Fatiha and when you send the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. So the Fatiha must be read in after the first takbir. And then the salat ala nabi is read after the second takbir. And then there's a third, and then there's a fourth. And the dua portion here can be shifted. It can be made after the third, which is what's typical and recommended, or it can be pushed back until after the fourth takbir, before the taslim. It's recommended for the imam, so there is some leniency there on that what happens after the third takbir, the dua, or you push that till the next. Otherwise, it has to maintain its order, such that you wouldn't say the salat ala nabi after the first and then move al-Fatiha, etc. Those 2 first portions, they have to be as they are. It's recommended for the imam and the one praying alone to stand at the chest. So the imam leading a congregation or one person praying the janazah. There's only one person to do it. So the congregation is just praying behind the imam. The recommendation for them doesn't apply here, this recommendation. So the imam or the one praying alone would stand at the chest of a man, meaning the deceased that's before you, you're standing at their chest. You have to line up somewhere, like the mihrab. Okay, the mihrab for you now is the chest of a man and the midsection of a woman, like her waist area, wasat imra'ah. And between that for the intersex person. Okay? وصفتها أن ينوي ثم يكبر ويقرأ الفاتحة ثم يكبر ويصلي على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كفي التشهد ثم يكبر ويدعو للميت والأفضل بشيء مما ورد ثم يكبر ويقف قليلا ويسلم وتجزئ واحدة ولو لم يقل ورحمة الله. Its description, the prayer, the funeral prayer that is as follows. One makes the intention. Again, niyyah. Then they say Allahu Akbar. And this is where you would raise your hands. Allahu Akbar, like you would in prayer. And then you recite Al-Fatiha. Then says takbir again, Allahu Akbar, invokes blessings upon the Prophet. This is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama, or he says kafit tashahud. This is often like a Salat Ibrahimiyya, is what they refer to it sometimes, a Durud al-Sharif. So that's what's said here after the second takbir. Then they say takbir again, this is the fourth time, and they supplicate for the deceased, saying, oh Allah, forgive, like Allahumma arhamhu, Allahumma aghfir lahu warhamhu. Allahumma arhamhu is the minimum that you can say to fulfill this portion of the prayer. Allahumma arhamhu, oh Allah, show mercy upon him. Preferably, however, the dua is made with what is transmitted. And there are various supplications that are made just for the janazah prayer. And then they say takbir again, and they pause briefly. So this is the fourth takbir. There's a brief pause, and finally they give salam. A single salutation or salam suffices, even if one does not say wa rahmatullah. So assalamu alaikum. This is what you would say to the right side. Assalamu alaikum. That would be enough. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah would be enough. But you can say on the other side as well. You can say directly in front of you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, whatever the case may be. One is sufficient for this prayer. Two, however, is what is typical. That gives you an idea of the funeral prayer. The next section is the transportation and burial of the deceased. The Imam, he says, وَحَمْلُهُ وَدَفْنُهُ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ وَيَسْقُطَانِ وَتَكْفِينٌ بِكَافِرٍ وسن كون ماش أمام الجنازة وراكب خلفها وقرب منها وإسراء بها وتعميق قبر وتوسيعه وكره رفع الصوت معها ولو بالذكر والقرآن وإدخال القبر خشبا أو ما مسته النار وتجصيصه وبناء وكتابة ومشي وجلوس عليه. So here, transporting and burying them, the deceased, are communal obligations. If carried out, both transportation and burial by a non-Muslim, the obligation is lifted. Here, the situation changes in regards to who can perform this part, transporting and burial. He says, وَحَمْلُهُ وَدَفْنُهُ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ وَيَسْقُطَانِ وَتَكْفِينٌ بِكَافِرٍ. Right, he also mentions the takfeen here, which is the shrouding. If it's carried out by a non-Muslim, then that would suffice. These things aren't like prayer or ritual purification. Prayer requires an intention. The kafir can't perform an intention. They can't produce an intention because the prerequisite is faith. Because you're intending this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And without true faith, the intention is not possible. It can't be formulated. What would they intend? Doing this for the God of the nature, the mother of the cosmos, for the divine spirit of the vapor, or for Jesus, yeah, or for Mary, or for Saint John. This guy, bro, Saint John. So they just can't perform. However, transporting, moving the body, burying the body, these things don't require intentions. Wrapping the body doesn't require the intention. So in this case, you may have a funeral service, this is typical for us in our part of the world. It may be that the funeral service has a non-Muslim driver, and they're in the hearse, and they're the ones that are going to drive the body. Maybe you've had to contract with other people outside of your community to fulfill these obligations. And so you get somebody to help you. Look, we're going to have to open the grave. We're not digging the holes. We might not be able to put them down in there. Maybe they have a machine that has to lower the body. Maybe there's some rules and regulations that are going to dictate how we fulfill these obligations. And so to have somebody to do these parts that's not from the faith, they will fulfill the obligation for the deceased. The job's going to get done. It's not an act which requires an intention involved. As I mentioned, prayer is a devotional act. Purification is a devotion. As we know, there's a difference between taking a shower and making ghusl. They might look the same, but the intention is what distinguishes them. Cleaning something, like cleaning, your body for wudu, one could be I'm just cleaning up, and the other one's I'm getting ready for prayer. Purification, the intention there is essential. It's what distinguishes the acts. And transporting a body, it's not an act of devotion, and therefore it's not something that needs to be distinguished. It's just a part of the process that has to get done. He says it is recommended for the following: to walk in front of the funeral procession and ride behind it, which is good for us because that's typically the way we work. The hearse carrying the body in the box often leads the way, and we're riding in our cars. We follow after them. To take the car ahead of the thing is not recommended. Recommended to follow after. To remain close to the funeral procession. To expedite it, meaning to move hastily, and to make the grave both deep and wide. There's no limit to this. To make the grave deep and wide. The following are disliked: raising one's voice during the procession, even with dhikr or Quran, placing wood or anything that has been burned by fire inside the grave, plastering it, meaning over the grave, building upon it, constructing something on top of it, riding on it, walking over it, or sitting on it are all disliked. Makruh. All right, that gives you some concepts there, some rules and regulations, some manners. The next part is the burial. He says, وَيَجِبُ أَن يُسْتَقْبَلَ بِهِ الْقِبْلَةُ وَيُسَنُّ على جنبه الأيمن وحرم دفن اثنين فأكثر في قبر إلا لضرورة والسنة أن يدخله ميت من عند رجليه إن كان أسهل وإلا فمن حيث سهل وقول مدخله بسم الله وعلى ملة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وحثو التراب عليه ثلاثا ثم يهال وتلقينه والدعاء له بعد الدفن ورش القبر بماء ورفعه قدر شبر. It's obligatory that they be positioned facing the Qibla, meaning that the person that's passed away, that's being buried, they should be positioned so that they can face the Qibla. Recommended that they be laid on their right side. يَجِبُ أَن يُسْتَقْبَلَ بِهِ الْقِبْلَةِ. It is an obligation that they face the Qibla. And recommended that they be on their right side. So, as long as they're facing the Qibla, you've met the obligation. They may be on their left, while it is recommended that they be on the right side. Okay, so that's something that we have to be very careful about and tend to in the heat of the moment. Sometimes we get rushed for some reason. I've noticed this. It is a recommendation to make haste. But much like prayer, making haste there's a standard to it that's measured by itmam, being complete, as opposed to just chilling out. Just sitting there. Body's there. Let's take a break. Let's talk a bit. Let's make some calls. Put the body in the ground. All right, let's take another break. Let's actually go out to eat. Come back. All right, we're making haste. It doesn't mean let's rush this and we start missing things. And we start looking for the most convenient way out, right? So the people that are involved in this have to understand how to properly prepare the place so that the body can be positioned on its side. As opposed to like, I've seen this quite a bit. They take the body, they lay it on its back, and they try and turn the face to the side. I mean, that's better than nothing, but that's not what we're talking about. You want the body to be facing the Qibla, ala jambihi al-ayman, on the right side of the body. So you're going to have to prop the body up. You might have to dig a channel into the ground so that the body can kind of fit in there so it doesn't flop over. Get the body nice and secured. Put them in there. Maybe put something behind the back if it's required, depending on how the grave is dug. And that's how you carry on to fulfill these obligations and requirements. He says, it's impermissible to bury 2 or more individuals in a single grave except out of necessity. Like there's a large number of people that have passed. Like maybe they've been killed. Maybe it was a wartime or there was a natural disaster or something and large people were deceased and there was not enough people to bury them properly. So you think about a mass grave. We just don't have the capacity to bury these people in an expedient manner. If we leave it to like burying everyone in the single grave, then the body will be out, decomposition will begin, the body's exposed to perhaps animals and things, and now we're in a much worse scenario than opening a large mass grave, putting people in there in a rather timely fashion so that we're not exposing them to the elements, etc., and then burying them all up. So this would be permissible in the event that it's a dire need. Otherwise, each person should be placed in their own grave. It's recommended to insert the deceased from the foot of the grave, if easier. So the grave is dug, and the head of the grave is where their head would be when they're in it, and the foot of it is where their feet would be when they're in it. And so what essentially they're saying, the description is, the body is to be brought into the grave, head down through the foot part. Right? As you can see, I'm demonstrating that. They're going to bring the body down in like this and place in the grave like that. If easier. Meaning, if this isn't the easiest way because there's some obstruction, then from anywhere, that's easy. But this is what's preferred. And this I found is typically the easiest way to do it. Because now you can have people managing the body up top and receiving the body down inside of the grave. As opposed to trying to put the body all at once into the grave, this has led to accidents of dropping the body. I've seen this myself. They're trying to manage the body all at one time and drops right on the ground. And they're trying to also manage the kefan, and sometimes they're holding it and it comes undone, which could lead to an exposure of the body. Again, being very careful, taking your time, having ihsan, striving to honor the person that's passed away in these last moments while they're above the ground. So this is the recommendation. And for the one placing them to say, Bismillah wa ala millati Rasulillah, in the name of Allah and upon the religion of His Messenger, to pour soil over the deceased 3 times, and then heap the remainder over them, right? So this is another practice that I typically see happen, is everybody wants to put dirt. There's a shovel, and everybody wants to get up there and shovel the dirt in handfuls and handfuls, and it takes quite a long time. Put 3 handfuls or 3 shovelfuls, and then move it all on. Just go for it. Put it all on there. So nowadays we have these earth movers. Somebody from the family members, puts the 3 handfuls or shovelfuls onto the deceased, onto the grave, and then you just move that thing and close it up. At this point, we've got the body secured, everything's ready. We don't need to drag out now the process of everybody taking a handful of dirt until we've filled up this large grave. Let's just go ahead and cover it and move on to the next portion of the proceedings. To prompt the deceased with the declaration of faith. Again, the talqeen is made here. So the talqeen was made before they passed, and now the talqeen is made as they're placed into the grave. And then to supplicate, then that's to have them say, La ilaha illallah. Qulu la ilaha illallah. Right, that's the talqeen. We're not looking for a response, obviously, but the deceased is aware, as we'll come to understand shortly. To supplicate for them after burial. That means make dua for them. This can be done there at graveside. This, by the way, is just giving us concepts, introducing us to the very basics of the funeral proceedings. There's a lot more detail to this. What other things can be done while you're in the grave site? What other things are recommended to do? And some things, obviously, that should be avoided. So some of the things that are recommended, making the dua for them after burial, sprinkle the grave with water. This is to kind of settle the earth and to raise it a height of a hand's span. That means there should be like a mound. Okay? A mound such as it's basically, and what's going to end up happening is that mound's going to settle. It will settle eventually. As you know, earth begins to settle and becomes more compact. That will settle down. But the idea is to leave enough on there in the event that it is going to settle, and at the very least it's going to mark a fresh grave. He says, وَإِن مَاتَتْ حَامِلٌ حَرُمَ شَقُّ بَطْنِهَا وَأَخْرَجَ النِّسَاءُ مَا تُرْجَى حَيَاتُهُ فَإِن تَعَذَّرَ لَمْ تُدْفَنْ حَتَّى يَمُوتْ وَإِن خَرَجَ بَعْضُهُ حَيًّا شُقَّ لِلْبَاقِي فَلَوْ مَاتَ قَبْلَ الشَّقِّ أُخْرِجَ حَتَّى يُغَسَّلَ وَيُكَفَّنَ بِلَا شَقٍّ فإن تعذر إخراجه غسل ما خرج منه وصلي عليه معها وإن لم يكن له 4 أشهر فأكثر صلي عليها دونه. It is impermissible to perform a post-mortem cesarean on a deceased pregnant woman. The woman has died, she has a baby in her womb. It's impermissible to perform a post-mortem cesarean, meaning to now split her open. However, women may extract the fetus if its survival is anticipated. If they think the baby is still alive and will live, they can now go in and try and remove the baby. If it's not possible, she is not to be buried until it dies, meaning the fetus. It's not possible to remove the baby. That's what they're saying. If you can't remove the baby, then you don't bury the baby alive. If a part of it emerges alive, a cesarean is performed for the remainder. Now, basically, you can be sure that the child is living, right? And we might require some fatwa body or council to help us understand detection of life today. Understand? Because the idea here is that you're not going to open the mother up for an uncertainty. When the baby comes out, half of it, then you can tell, all right, it's a living child. And so now we want to extract the child. And in this case, the cesarean, shaq here is what's being referred to. This basically means just opening her, like with, cutting her open. The baby would be extracted in this case. Otherwise, you would, if you're unable to do it, then you have to wait for the baby to pass away. If it dies before the cesarean, it is still extracted without cutting in order to be washed and shrouded. If extraction proves impossible, whatever portion has exited is to be washed and the funeral prayer performed over it alongside herself. If it is less than 4 months, then only she is prayed over. All right? The last section here is about condolences. This is ta'ziyah. He says, وَتَعْزِيَةُ مُسْلِمٍ وَلَوْ صَغِيرًا إِلَى 3 أيام سُنَّةٌ فَيُقَالُ لِمُسْلِمٍ مُصَابٍ بِمُسْلِمٍ أَعْظَمَ اللَّهُ أَجْرَكَ وَأَحْسَنَ عَزَاكَ وَغَفَرَ لِمَيِّتِكَ or لِمَيْتِكَ وَيُرَدُّ مُعَزًّا بِقَوْلِ اسْتَجَابَ اللَّهُ دُعَاءَكَ وَرَحِمَنَا وَإِيَّاكَ وَأَيُّ قُرْبَةٍ فُعِلَتْ وَجُعِلَ ثَوَابُهَا لِمُسْلِمٍ حَيٍّ أَوْ مَيْتٍ نَفَعُهُ ذَلِكَ. Okay? It's recommended to offer condolences to a Muslim, even if young, within 3 days. After that is disliked. Your condolences when someone's passed away, 3 days. That's the time that's recommended. After that is disliked to do so. The 4th day, 5th day, and beyond is disliked to offer condolences because now you're just opening the wound again. You're just reminding them of the loss again. And in Islam, we have a mourning period. We're allowed to mourn for a certain period, and then we got to carry on with our life. We can't fall in a state of depression, and now we have voided our own lives because of someone else's passing, when we understand that that's the nature of life, is that there is death. That's the way Allah created us. Everything that's living is going to die. The only one that remains eternally is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we're not going to fall into a state of depression and now our lives are over because of a loved one or family member that's passed away. But in Islam, you can mourn, you can be sad, of course. You can even cry as a sign of mercy and love, but you cannot go overboard here. And so a part of the process is acknowledging your pain and your sadness and your loss, the community coming to your support, offering your condolences, supporting you in your time of need. But then once that window of time is over, now it's like, okay, I'm going to help you move on by not reminding you about this right now. So I'm not going to offer condolences unless there is a time in which beyond that period is okay, unless you were away and you could not offer condolences, and it would be helpful for you to do so. Maybe they're a close friend, and they would be expecting that from you. And you came late, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later. You were traveling, you were gone, you couldn't get on the phone or whatever. And then when you meet them, they would be expecting, because of your relationship, at this point it's not disliked. Hey, listen, then you make a dua for them. And at that point, yeah, they're going to appreciate it more than they would be diminished, if you will, by it. And the supplication that's to be said, as he says here, one who is afflicted by the loss of a fellow Muslim is to be told, may Allah magnify your reward, perfect your consolation, and forgive your deceased. The one receiving condolences replies, may Allah answer your supplication and have mercy on us and you. Any act of devotion carried out on behalf of a Muslim, whether living or deceased, will benefit them. So this means performing something with the intention of the reward going to another Muslim. Hayyan, or he says, hayyan aw maytan, right? Thawabuha li muslimin hayyan aw maytan nafa'hu dhalika. So some restrict this to like charity, and maybe those types of things. But according to the madhab, this is any act of piety, any qurba that you want to gift the reward to a Muslim, whether they're living or dying, it will be a benefit to them. So if you wanted to offer prayers for them to have the reward, you wanted to read the Quran on their behalf, you wanted to build a masjid for them, you wanted to fast for them to receive the reward, anything here. أي قربة فعلت وجعل ثوابها لمسلم نفعه ذلك. Any type of obedience, closeness, an act of righteousness can be dedicated in its reward to a Muslim. And sometimes that's needed. You might feel like, I got to fill the scales. I got to try and fill the scales for my loved one that's passed away. Or I might not feel like I need to feel the scales for them because maybe they were great, but I owe them so much. Maybe it's a parent, for example. That's typically what it would be. A parent, perhaps. Like, I owe them my life. So why would I not, while I was taking care of them while they were living, not continue to take care of them after they've passed away? And from time to time, I will do something for their sake and dedicate it to them. He says, وَتُسَنُّ زِيَارَةُ الْقُبُورِ لِلرِّجَالِ وَتُكْرَهُ لِلنِّسَاءِ وَإِنْ عَلِمْنَا أَنَّهُ يَقَعُ مِنْهُنَّ مُحَرَّمٌ حُرِمَتْ ويجوز البكاء على الميت ويحرم ندب ونياحة وشق ثوب ولطم خد ونحوه. This is where we end here, or about where we end. It's recommended for men to visit the graves, disliked for women. So women can visit, it's disliked. It becomes prohibited if they know something impermissible will occur. So if a woman knows that if she goes to the grave, she'll be overwhelmed by emotion and she will be unable to control herself there and do something that's impermissible there, then it's not allowed for her to attend or to visit. It's permissible to weep over the deceased, as I mentioned, but lamenting, this is known as nedb, which is when one cries while mentioning the deceased good qualities. Or wailing, it's a type of wailing that's known as niyaha, and this is when one does basically the same thing, except now they're raising their voice loudly in like a wailing tone. Oh, so-and-so did so-and-so, like that. Okay, and they used to actually hire people to do this, to come and attend the funerals and to wail and to lament and to praise and to, exalt, etc. Also, tearing garments. That's another thing. They get out there and they just start ripping away or striking at their cheeks. Those types of things. It's like, they used to do this on like purpose. Like I said, sometimes you would hire some people to come and you would have them do these things to like exaggerate the feelings of loss and to venerate or trying to elevate the status of the one that passed away. Like, we got to make a good show of this. They got to go out with a bang. This has got to be a memorable moment. Like, oh, you guys are losing out on this amazing, look at all these women crying and they're ripping and they're hitting it. Yeah. This is all prohibited. Other acts like plucking, shaving, or removing one's hair. Those types of things were practices at some point that became associated with this extremeness when it came to visiting the graves or burying the deceased. The last thing he says, وَيَعْرِفُ الْمَيْتُ زَائِرَهُ يَوْمَ الْجُمْعَةِ قَبْلَ طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ. The deceased recognizes their visitors, and this is noted, the deceased knows their visitors at all times, but especially on Fridays before sunrise. قَبْلَ طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ. And they are annoyed by evil in their presence, but pleased with righteousness. They're made aware. The deceased are made aware of their visitors, and they're made aware of the condition of their loved ones, such that if their loved one, like a family member or a child or something, is doing well in their life, they're made aware of that, and they're pleased by that. But the opposite is also true. That if their loved one is not doing well, maybe they're living a sinful life, maybe it was a situation where while they were alive, that person was a good person because of their presence and their leadership, and then they passed away, and that person started to be rebellious. And I've seen this happen more than one time. And it's typically a parent passes away and the child that was an outwardly pious and religious child, adult now I'm talking about. You know the position of that parent when they passed away and that child starts to now rebel. Thinking, oh, yeah, that my parent was the one keeping me in line, and now that they're away, what's the saying? The cat's away so the mice will play. And they start playing about. And so this is something that we need to remember, is that your loved one, like your parent or whatever it may be, your spouse or whatever that was in the grave, now is going to be made aware of what it is that you're doing. If you continue on with a good life, they're going to be pleased and they'll be happy in their grave. And if your life begins to take a turn for the worse, then they're going to be sad. They're going to be annoyed. They're going to be upset. Yeah. And that's where we're going to wrap up for today. When we join next time, not next week, but the following week, inshallah, for our next class, we'll begin looking at Kitab Zakat. So, jazakallah khair for your attention and your presence. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوة